welcome to the video series where we are pulling cards from tarot to try to find some more insights about each zodiac sign. So this is a video for Cancer. So any of you Cancer signs out there, you Cancer rising signs or even moon signs, this should relate to you. Anybody that just has a lot of aspects in that sign. You could probably see these cards quite often when you're getting read for or when you're reading. So, okay. The first one, the moon, no surprise there. So I just wanted to preface this by saying we have some expected cards obviously to see. You know, with Cancer and the major arcana, we expect to see what is it? Chariot. Oh my God. So the Chariot. I talked so much and so fast for the Gemini video, and then Cancer, I just slow it down. Okay, so we already have some cards here, and let me just resurface if you guys are having a hard time right now during this Pisces season of just kind of like delivering things. I guess it's because it's in Sagittarius, so there's a knack for things going wrong right now for you guys. Maybe I'm just feeding into that. So first off the bat, we have the moon. So not necessarily the Chariot. We've been getting a lot of surprises in these readings, which is so cool because I like to explore other cards that come up, you know, even in the minor arcana that you wouldn't necessarily attach to one sign, but it seems to be giving us a lot of insights. And so the moon obviously isn't a total shock because that is your planet or your celestial body that really emphasizes your sign and the sensitivities that come with it. Usually this card is reserved for Pisces, and just thinking about what I just said, I mean, we are in the middle of Pisces season, so you guys would really be experiencing this right now, even more heightened. But any time of the year, it's not a surprise for a Cancer to draw this card. This card really represents fears. It represents wishes and dreams. It represents not knowing exactly where to find the answers, but it's internalizing and kind of self-realizing. Like, this is a pretty impactful card. You know, where we have the sun energy is more buoyant, it's childlike, it's really kind of in your face. You know, it's very warm and enjoyable. The moon is a little harder to approach or harder to understand because it's really about the individual and what is their most sensitive, triggering thing that's going on. And the moon illuminates that. Just like a full moon or a new moon, they emphasize the things that we're supposed to be most working on, or they even emphasize the secrets that are coming out. And with Cancer, I definitely feel like that water elements makes you guys hold a lot in. You internalize a lot. You might get like some criticisms from Cancer, but like there's a lot of stuff that they really don't say out of like self-defense maybe. You know, just because they kind of live in an intimate world, maybe less so than a Pisces or a Scorpio. I feel like those probably go the depths a little farther. Cancer is more so symbolized by the shoreline, and look, we have that. We even have a crustacean, which looks like a crab. It's a lobster, but very, very close. There's not a crab in the tarot, so I don't think so. Not in the Rider-Waite. So we do get that symbolism there. We get the moon, we get some waves, there are ripples. Even the mountains in the back, they kind of look like waves because it's the color of water. So it's really hard to identify where the water starts and stops, and I think it just really emulates your sign. There's always just a constant churning of emotions. It's very unexpected, but it hits you all the time, no matter the time or place. You kind of wear that with you. And so you take your home, you know, as a crustacean, as something that travels with a home on its back, like a hermit crab or something. You carry all of that intimacy with you wherever you go. And so there's a natural level of vulnerability that comes, even though you have a character that's very hardened out of self protection, because a lot of people prey on that stuff. I think we see that with the water signs. They're symbolized by a lot of creatures that are preyed upon. And so I think that's why they're very sensitive, because they feel like they have less defenses. Now, a mother could be the archetype for the moon, and a mother is a little more protective. So a mother is more hardened. It's kind of it would be hard for a lot of animals to really attack a crab or like pierce the shell before getting hurt, from it first with the claws and just with the hardened protective layer. Um, and that's kind of what the moon is. It's really identifying where your soft spots are in an individual that's very hardened or desensitized, or just coming to terms with the stuff that it really hits you close to home. And so it's less for other people to know. The moon is more personal, it's more intimate. And so it's more so you self identifying your fears, your secrets, those things that are really immobilizing you almost. Because we see here with the dogs, it almost looks like to some degree that they're blocking the path for the crustacean. And so you feel like it's a very dangerous path to walk. It's almost like the turtle really resonates for me in my life. I'm not sure how Cancerian it is, but that path from a baby turtle that it has to get out to the ocean is a very, very treacherous journey. I mean, they don't travel very far, but if you just think of how exposed it is in that transition, it can make you very, very scared to do that. And the turtle is just making that journey on its own. The mom isn't really waiting for it. It has to make that transition and step outside of its home and make it successfully into the water. And then once they're in the water, there's all kinds of predators. There's predators on shore, there's humans, and then once you get into the water, there's a whole array that they have to deal with. So luckily, they do have a lot of defenses. They have a protective shell. I think if anything, we can see that with Cancer first and foremost. Cancer represents the skin, so it stops a lot from entering us. It stops us from getting sick constantly, from being exposed to things. It's like the sunburns that we get is an indication that, we're not tough enough to stand outside in just any kind of environment without responding to it. So Cancer really symbolizes the place and how it's affecting you. Less so about the relationships, it's more so about where you're at. And so we go from the moon. That feels like a lot to kind of go into. And the moon just really just shows that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have emotions. It's okay to be scared. I mean, I think we all try to put on a tough face all the time, but Cancers are very comfortable with letting their emotions out and for people to see. I think they often get trivialized for their emotions, and they get kind of like stereotyped or just not taken seriously because they wear them so close. Whereas a Scorpio or a Pisces might be a lot more hidden, but they're still very, very much present in their emotional intelligence. I think we could take a lesson from, just kind of wearing what we're feeling on us. There's always a time and a place, so it's not fitting for every occasion, but it is nice to see that there are people comfortable with it out there in this world where we're kind of in all of these constructs of, not really displaying what we're truly feeling. So I find it refreshing, but it can also be dangerous. The path is very dangerous. It's dangerous to put yourself out there. That's what I think the moon emulates, is like making that transition from feeling it internally to letting it out. Because that's what we see with the moon here. It almost looks like a sun. And so you see the moon cascading into the sun. It almost looks like an eclipse happening. And eclipses are really big events. in astrology, they're much more heightened energy. And so when we get this, maybe you guys just feel like you go through very intense emotional struggles internally, not necessarily what everyone else is seeing, but what's going on in you is a constant churning of the water, of the waves, and it's very hard for you guys to navigate or to push through that comfort zone and make that path into something different. I definitely think that there's a lot of immobilization by fear here because we see these pillars in the background, maybe mountains, but they could almost be waves. And so it just shows that it's just going to be constant, kind of no matter where you're at. Even if you're out of the water for just a little bit, there is still water on both sides almost. There's emotion all around. But it's really identifying where those emotions stem from and what they're attached to is kind of the revelations of this card. This card comes a lot farther into the major arcana, and that's why it's a little more complex to kind of to go through. And so it's hard just looking at it to just tie it to one thing because it's almost so symbolic. There's so much wrapped in there. And the Chariot may be a little easier to understand for you guys because it really symbolizes the home life. And then this is more so metaphorical, metaphysical. It's about stepping outside of your spiritual self and pushing those boundaries and those limits and ascending in a bigger sense because the Pisces that's tied to this card comes at the end of the zodiac, the end of everything. And so it's taken on everything around that journey, whereas Cancer is only the first water sign. So there's two more after it. And it comes really early in the summertime. So we don't see quite the complexity or the depth that like we would in Pisces, but obviously you guys identify with this card nevertheless. And yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I think there's a duality there that does symbolize Cancer. I think you guys get a lot of that coming from Gemini right before you. Transitioning to Cancer, you still keep that duality, that male, feminine nature, Cancer is like the female sign of the zodiac. It represents women, it represents family, motherhood, the feminine physique, the stomach, and like just all of that stuff. And so you see that in order for motherhood to happen, there has to be another. There has to be a male counterpart or there has to be a second. And so I think that's why a lot of that is symbolized by two, because you take that lover's aspect of Gemini and you're making it more home-centered. You're stabilizing it. You're making it a little pastoral or concentrated, where Geminis maybe have more so love flings as opposed to an actual relationship like a marriage. Maybe the Chariot is really symbolizing a union, a marriage of sorts, that's a little more serious. And so the moon here is just emphasizing that these secrets, these revelations do affect others in your life. And so maybe that's why you hold them a lot closer, because you are almost afraid of everyone noticing it before you feel comfortable letting it out. I guess that's something that you have in common with a Leo. Sorry. So Four of Cups. Now this is like the card I always see with Cancers. I'm not surprised by this, but it's not one that you would immediately think of specific to Cancers. Yes, it is in the Cups suit, which is the water suit in tarot. So we would likely see a lot of water elements at play here. And then the blue, it continues this lush blue background. And blue, as pretty as it can look, it does represent sadness and emotions in general. And you feeling blue, there's this innate sadness to the water signs that it's harder for them to move through because they constantly carry it with them. Sometimes it looks like pessimism, or sometimes it looks like being able to cry easily. Sometimes it looks like fear. Sometimes it looks like, just being overtly aggressive. It's like whatever that translates to, that emotion is heightened in the water signs and in cancers for sure. But here we have the four, so you guys are the fourth um, sign of the zodiac, so no surprise to see a four there. Four of Cups is really about that pessimism. This is less about pronounced emotion like we have with the moon. The moon is very heightened emotional sensitivity. That's when you've reached kind of that full climax of emotion to where it's destabilizing, where you have to take action on it. This is more so sitting on inaction. Four of Cups is not dealing with the root of the problem or the heart of the problem, and it's just kind of like living the same stuff over and over. I find this card to be very cyclical. I really didn't know whether it was up or down because it was like sideways, so we'll just take it at face value like this. But this can be a really difficult card if you don't work with it. This really shows that there is an innate sense of not letting yourself have more. Maybe with the mom archetype associated with cancers, you guys are always putting others' needs before your own. And I think we see that with this card. This card is just focused on the three cups. And when something is offered to you, you have a tendency to not be able to accept it. Spiritually or physically. So you don't like handouts, you don't like people giving you things, you really don't know how to accept gifts. Maybe that's a real struggle, and because you're so much more comfortable with creating those gifts, giving those gifts out, that's where you get your satisfaction from, is just giving positive emotion to others. And so this could really show a negligence that there are things out there specifically for you, and there are chances out there if you would be willing enough to take them. And so it's a kind of an interesting transition from this card, which is maybe the sun is raining down opportunity, is raining down emotion. When we express emotions, we usually unlock things within ourselves. We're able to move and transition. And so this shows that once you experience that heightened awareness and express the emotion, that opportunity usually follows. Now, the only trepidation is, will you reach out and grab that cup? Because it looks like the person isn't even acknowledging its presence. So I think there's a tendency to not want the thing that's best for yourself. I do think we see that a lot with cancer because we see such a strong attachment to the past. Once a crab takes hold of something, it's very hard to let go of. We've all seen those videos on social media where the idiot, like, of course the crab is just going to grab whatever you put near it. That's just the nature of it, when it feels defenseless. And it's just almost impossible to get free. And so it can be really dangerous once it takes a hold of something. And I think that speaks a lot to the Cancerian nature. Once you guys take hold of a concept or a feeling, you really revel in it for a long time. You don't move through it quickly. Yes, we do have moon phases, but it's almost cyclical. Like I said, that I think that's going to come back around because the phases, you experience them over and over, whereas maybe the rotation of the planets is a longer journey. Yes, it will come back to its point again, but it's a longer period of time. There's a lot more variables that happen in that length, but you guys are more attuned to a 30-day cycle where it is very controlled almost. It's very almost predictable, and you guys like that nature because that's your planetary celestial body, and so you're very used to that, moving quickly through the emotions, but you experience them over and over. And so there's not a lot of new, and I think one reason is that you guys have a tendency to not accept things out of that orbit, out of that cycle. So you feel like you're very bound to what you've already experienced. You come before Leo, which is fire is beginnings. And so the water signs really take the three elements before them and they just kind of hold on to it. They just, the last thing that we experience, I guess, on our journey through each of the signs is always emotion. is always the harder aspects, and emotion can transform us. It can put us in touch with something spiritual, something beyond the physical, even more so than air. Spiritual, you can't see readily. Air signs you can see in a text message, you can see in the expression on someone's face. But water, not necessarily that you can't see emotion happening, but it is more distant. It is harder to feel exactly what someone else is feeling. You can agree with someone really easily, like, yeah, man, I had the same idea. But a feeling, when two people watch the exact same movie or something, they can be completely different, respond to the different scenes altogether, maybe not respond at all, and the other does. And so it's a very, very intimate form of expression. And I think water signs are blessed and cursed having to deal with that. And we see them struggle with it and how they impact the others around them when they're not really in control, or they've got a handle on it. Maybe they're not moving through those emotions. Maybe when we get those volatile water signs, it's because they're still back here and they're stuck. And they're like, if I could just get through to where I need to be, I wouldn't stop affecting people so much. Not that I'm saying every water sign out there is just constantly bringing other people down. You guys definitely have room for innovation. I mean, Scorpio is always at the top of something, really, really paving the way, teaching us all how to reborn. I mean, we need mothers, we need caregivers. You guys are so important for us, but it is important to take a lesson out of your own book, to push yourselves, not just focus on pushing others. And I think that's when you guys really get shy, you get hardened, you get defensive, because you're like, I don't need to do this for myself. I'm doing it. Just because it's for somebody else doesn't mean I'm not doing it. Well, you're not fully living that experience. You're pushing it on to someone else when maybe it's time for you to also take in that cup for yourself. Feed yourself. Like, mothers are always putting the food on the table for everyone else first. You guys need to be more assertive when it comes to doing those self things. I think there's definitely a hard time doing that. I like these two cards. The first one I started out with was pretty complex, so I hope you bared with me. And yeah, just coming out of that Gemini one, it was just so da 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 da. And then this, you can really tell with the Cancerian pace, it's a lot harder for me to communicate those insights. We see Virgo in the third house of Cancer, and Virgo is very shy, it's very reserved. It's not very forthcoming of a sign. It's an earth sign, so it tends to restrict as opposed to disperse. And so I definitely feel like I have to push or reach a little farther in talking about that Cancerian nature, just to kind of get it out there in this way. And so it's really interesting to see the signs at play when they're focused on. So yeah, not too surprised by these cards. I think these, out of the other three signs we've done, these are the most, they look overtly Cancerian in nature, or at least water. We definitely get that element at play there. So let me know what you guys think. I'm going to have the rest of the signs come up. And so if you're curious or you want to learn about your rising or your moon and how that plays out, definitely check out for those videos coming. I'm just going to go through, and I guess I'll still do Pisces, even though we did do the one card meaning of Pisces, which is really cool, and I hope you watch, because it wasn't unexpected, but I had a lot to say about that card. So definitely check out that video. It would be a great way to understand the season that we're in right now. But yeah, stay tuned. I'll have all these videos up soon, and subscribe to my channel. If you're on Instagram, follow at Stars on Stars. It is a picture of me wearing a cowboy hat, and there's a lot of fun we're having with film characters and astrology and tying the two together. So if you love either of those things, check out that page. I bet